Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Well, the detail of Budget 2025 will be announced next Tuesday, and amidst worries about rising wage pressures and business costs, companies are eagerly awaiting to hear how the government will support them during this challenging time. Melissa Fenlon, Director of PwC's Southeast Practice, joins us now to outline what it is calling for in Budget 2025. Melissa, in your opinion, is this the most important budget of this government's tenure?
Good morning, Karl, and thank you for having me back. Pleasure to be here. To be honest, it's a very important one because obviously we have the election in our sights, although that hasn't been confirmed whether it's pre or post-Christmas yet. They'll obviously have that in mind when they're implementing any measures or they're thinking about what they're trying to attract in this budget. But to be fair, they've been in a surplus position for a couple of years now. Last year we had a very good kind of giveaway budget that a lot of people benefited from. I think everyone will be expecting something similar, but I do believe that they will play it safe also. So it might not be as much of a giveaway as people think.
And in relation to this giveaway budget that there's much talk about, would such a budget be entirely positive for the economy if it was to transpire?
I think we had some trepidation on this last year, Karl, where there was kind of a risk that it could increase inflation over time. Now, a lot of the economists would have said that they got the balance fairly right and they weren't too worried. And I think that's come to light, thank God. And inflation hasn't increased as much as the spending did. So if they can find the balance in a similar way this year, we should be okay and it should benefit the economy overall.
So what does PwC hope to see in the upcoming budget, Melissa?
There's three things basically that they need to focus on. They need to solve the housing crisis, and tax policy and tax incentives can really help that. We hope that it will support the future growth of the economy. And there is a huge push now for the transition to net zero, and we are well behind our kind of targets for hitting those things. So we're hoping to see all measures in the budget to help with that. Some of the things as well that we really hope for is that private businesses and entrepreneurs and also the middle income earners will be helped out with different rate effects and different credits that might be kept. And some of those have been leaked kind of already and they should be positive. But another big one that we really are hoping for is a simplification overall of the tax system. It's got extremely heavy compliance burden on all employers and employees alike nearly at this stage to be tax compliant. So we're hoping for some simplifications all around in that area.
Of course, we are hearing a lot about the closures in the hospitality sector right now. But do you think that a return to the 9% VAT rate would actually solve the problem for many of the businesses in that sector?
I think there's been a lot of over-focus on the 9% rate. Of course, it was hugely beneficial, and I think anyone who got a coffee in Wexford or the surrounding areas recently will have seen the signs in the cafes campaigning for it to come back and help out the hospitality sector overall. I will say it was always meant to be a temporary measure so that it could alleviate some COVID and some other kind of cost of living crisis. I don't think we will be going back to it, so it is something we're going to have to learn to live with. And there's a reason for that, and it's because we're EU-led on our VAT legislation. So we will have to kind of learn how to get along with the 13.5 rate that's now applicable to all the hospitality sector. And what I would say is that I don't know if it's entirely responsible either. Of course, it's had an effect. Of course, we're all feeling it in our pockets because the prices have to increase and be knocked on to the customers. But I don't know if it's entirely the VAT.
Another contentious issue for businesses is the likely increase to the minimum wage rates and the expansion of the statutory sick leave entitlements. But could we see a pause to these increases in the budget given the circumstances?
I think so, Karl, and there has been a lot of pushback on this, and this is something that also obviously affects the hospitality sector and beyond, but it is a big one for them. We would hope that they would pause it and maybe reassess and bring it in on a more phased basis that's already planned. So yes, hopefully there will be something on that in the budget.
And in terms of proactive actions to support businesses, what is PwC calling for?
We're calling for simplification. We're calling for kind of more assistance in the labour market so that they can have some upfront deferral of income taxes for share awards for SMEs, a simplification of some of the schemes that are in place that are overly complicated to get into, such as KEEP or EIIS. If any of those for your listeners that they've tried to get into, they'll know how complicated the conditions are. And they're very valuable relief. So from a labour market perspective, they could be simplified in a lot. We'd like to see some help for the housing crisis to attract more talent in, which will really help the private business game in the labour market. That could be something like being able to give accommodation at a below market rate without having BIK on it or something like that. And we want to attract investment. We would love the government to have kind of more schemes like the angel investor scheme to attract more investors into the private business area in particular. And even at that, the angel investment one was very valuable and it was really welcome last year. But again, it's overly complicated and anyone who's tried to get it would know that. So again, simplifying these reliefs that are coming in is really important. Another one that's on the table is entrepreneur relief. We'd love to see that increase from 1 million to at least 5 million in the next budget.
And in relation to EIIS, the Employment Investment Incentive Scheme, what needs to happen to simplify that?
It needs to have a full list of the conditions that are necessary. At the minute, there are a lot of hoops to jump to qualify for this. Not only does the amount need to go up, as I've just said, from 1 million to 5 million at least we'd be looking for, because the value of all investments, the value of our private businesses have really increased since the scheme first came in. But also it's taking too much time and it's too convoluted to try and get into this scheme. So we really wanted to look at the conditions of that.
And why does PwC believe that a temporary PRSI rebate for employers of lower paid workers would make a material difference for businesses?
Our private sector employ a lot of these lower paid workers, and it's close to 1.2 million in the private sector that are being employed at the minute. So they're crucial to the economy, Karl, and we're heavily reliant on them here in the South East in particular as well. So we believe that this employer PRSI rebate would be a pro-growth measure to help all of the employers basically who do employ these kind of workers. It would also be somewhat of an offset for these proposed minimum wage increases over the next years.
Of course, personal tax is always an area which is subject to scrutiny in the budget. So what changes could be made to the personal tax regime?
Again, a simplification is needed. At the minute, it's overly complex. One we would particularly like to see, and one that was called out actually by this government when they were first elected, was an abolishment of the USC, which we haven't seen come into practice. We're expecting that there will be a 0.5 decrease in USC in this budget, but no mention of an abolishment at this time, which is something we would like to see in the future. That would simplify things and obviously take out one additional tax head for us to consider. What we do suspect is that the income tax rate bounds, the lower one, will be increased from 42 to 44, which will definitely be felt in the pockets of our middle earners, which is a welcome one if it does come in.
From an FDI perspective, are there additional measures that could be implemented to strengthen FDI investment into Ireland?
Absolutely. There's never enough really that can be done for our FDI sector, and it's so important to our economy, both locally and on a more kind of statewide perspective. The participation exemption for dividends is coming in from the 1st of January 2024. This is hugely important for our FDI sector. This basically means that you can receive dividends from foreign jurisdictions tax-free now without incurring some withholding taxes. So that's hugely important, and it is a simplification measure for the FDI sector. Pillar 2, which is our 15% tax rate, global tax rate that's coming in for everyone with high global profits of over 750 million. That will be the focus for the FDI sector over the next coming years. So what will be great is to again simplify the compliance that will be with that as much as possible to ease the burden for our FDI sector, and just generally to simplify the tax system overall in a similar way to private businesses. FDI sector have a lot of compliance burden on their case now.
What do you expect the government to do to ease the burden in relation to the cost of living?
I think there will be a focus on the housing crisis as it feeds into the cost of living crisis, Karl. So we are hoping that there will be an increase to the rental tax credit. It probably will go from 800 to 1,000. We hope to see the Help to Buy scheme extended further. We hope that the landlord's tax credit that was introduced last year will also be increased. And we hope that there will be an energy credit of €450, which will be paid before Christmas, which is a change from last year. I think last year it was split up 2 payments and we had to wait until after Christmas. So they again will be helped to ease the burden of people coming up to the Christmas and the cost of living crisis.
And finally, Melissa, what is PwC's outlook for the Irish economy over the year 2025?
Thankfully, Karl, I think we're in a very strong position. Locally, we have nearly full employment in the South East now. We haven't been able to say that in a very long time. That's a great news story to be able to tell. Our clients are doing really well, and we feel a good buzz in the local economy. And as I said, on a more statewide level, we feel the outlook for 2025 is quite positive. Obviously, we have an election on the horizon and it will affect things, but we're very hopeful.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Melissa Fenlon, Director of PwC's South East Practice, and we eagerly await next Tuesday's budget.
South East Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.